Morning, everybody. Morning, everybody. We have quorum. Welcome to meeting 10 of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Great. The Deputy Mayor is listening. Welcome to members of the committee, and of course, visiting councilors are always welcome. For those in the room with us, the screen at the back of the room provides real-time updates concerning where we are on the agenda and what's coming up next. And of course, you can always follow the proceedings on your tablet, smartphone at toronto.ca/council. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga, the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Hearing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the November 7th, 2019 meeting? Councillor McKelvey, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. All right, let's do a quick rundown of the agenda. Take any holds. Item 1, contract award, professional engineering services support delivery of Toronto Water's coordinated standalone water main replacement program. Anyone like to hold this item?
Staff report.
Councillor Cole is moving the staff report. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 2 will hold for deputations. Item 3, non-competitive contract with Code for Canada for the development of a data platform for traffic collision and volume data. Anyone like to hold this item? No? Someone move it? I don't have a list. I don't have any speakers on the item. 10.3, I don't have it. Are there? You'll hold it? Sorry, okay. There's no 10.3, there's no speakers. Oh, okay, sorry, I thought you were on 10.3. No, we're moving quickly here. Yes, you are. You want to hold 10.3? Yeah. Okay, 10.3 held by Deputy Mayor. Not about that. You don't want to talk to it? 10.4, we're holding for speakers. Now 10.5 is for information only, and under our rules of order, there's no debate and no deputations, but I have, oh my gosh. I think it was an earthquake. 10.5, we'd like to defer that to the next scheduled meeting on January the 9th, 2020.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Can I just, so when it gets deferred to January, if we can have deputations?
Absolutely, yes.
I have a number of residents that wanted to speak on this item. Okay?
Yes. No, absolutely. I guess you can talk to deferral and squeeze your comments in. Okay, so we'll deal with this item on.
Okay, you're out of order.
Okay, enough of the crosstalk. There's an item before us, 10.5. We're going to defer this to January 9, 2020 meeting of the Infrastructure Environment Committee, so we can hear from the public and ask questions of staff and, of course, speak to the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Uh, 10.6. Executing purchase of goods and service contracts, including construction by General Manager, Transportation Services Division.
I'll move staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations moved by Councillor Cole. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Sewers and water supply by, item 7. Sewers and water supply bylaws 2018 compliance and enforcement annual report and report on the Lavender Creek water quality assessment.
Can I?
I'm holding Lavender Creek.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I know I'm an outsider, but can I say something?
Well, the item's being held.
Yeah, okay, it's in my ward, so I've been...
Oh, yeah, no, you'll get a chance to ask questions of staff and speak to the item. So we'll hold, was that Councillor Cole holding it? Okay, held by Councillor Cole. Item number 8, ensuring the quality of Toronto's drinking water update. The recommendations are moved. There's nobody who wants to hold it? Okay. All those in favor of moving the recommendations? Recommendations are moved. Yeah, so there actually was a motion. I just realized that has to go along with that, so I'm going to hold that item. Okay. Yeah, so we need a motion to reconsider. I'd like to reopen item 8, which we just adopted. On the reopen? Okay. All right. All those in favor of reopening?
All those in favor of reconsidering the item, Councillor Cole, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Pasternak. Any opposed? Any opposed? No, I'm in favor. All those in favor of reconsidering the item, Councillor Cole, Councillor Layton, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Pasternak. All those opposed, Deputy Mayor Renan Wong. That motion carries.
Absolutely. Number 9, N-Wave Deepwater Cooling Expansion Proposals Amendment to the Energy Transfer Agreement. Councillor McKelvey is moving staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And item number 10, there is a deputant. The Chute closure program, and that comes from a letter from Councillor Nunziata.
The letter is from Councillor Nunziata on item 10.10.
10.10?
On to the speaker.
It's held for a speaker. 10.10. We have one new item. Everyone taking a look at it. It's, I think, Deputy Mayor Renan Wong is taking carriage of it. Pedestrian safety at the intersection of Rogers Road and Old Western Road. Just voting to put it onto the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So that is on the agenda. And that is, I guess, item 11. All right, I think we're on item 2, a temporary suspension of Toronto Zenith contracting. We do have a speaker here, Aldo Paganelli. Yes? You're welcome to speak. You have 5 minutes. And you are the President and CEO of Toronto Zenith Contracting.
Sent or through that I'm going to speak to. It got sent to the committee. I sent it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, no, everyone sees the correspondence on this item. Okay, great.
I'm basically going to read verbatim. I'm just here to be present. So, dear Infrastructure and Environment Committee, by way of introduction, I'm the President and CEO of Toronto Zenith Contracting Limited. I'm a proud citizen of Toronto and have lived here most of my life. I think this is the best city in the world, but I'm also just as proud of my company and all the great projects we have been involved in over the years to make Toronto, the region, and this province a better place. Hence, it's with deep regret that I find myself here today, standing before or sitting before this committee to address my company's possible suspension on bidding City of Toronto work for the next year. I am also troubled by the city's practice of publishing its judgments on the internet, and I'll come to that. As the President and CEO of Toronto Zenith, one of my jobs is to protect our company's strong reputation and image that we've built up over the past 60 years that we've been in business. But I also understand that it's your right and responsibility to choose who you want to do business with. However, the practice of publishing these judgments on subjective matters that have not been heard by a third party has the potential to cause unnecessary damages to our good reputation. Heavy civil construction is a service that Toronto Zenith has been providing since its incorporation in 1959 here in the City of Toronto. We build bridges, roads, sewers, and tunnels as a general contractor throughout Ontario. And our company annually provides employment of approximately 150 to 200 people, unionized workforce yearly. As we speak, within about a 20-kilometer radius right here, we're currently working on approximately $100 million worth of civil projects at various stages of completion. They are all complex projects on 400 series type highways. We work with the Ministry of Transportation, Metrolink, CP, CN Rail, most municipalities throughout the region we have or throughout the years. We have a solid safety and quality reputation with all the owners we work for. We are course certified. It's a certificate of recognition for our safety program. We continually hold ourselves, I believe, to the highest standards when it comes to safety of our employees, our job sites, and our fellow citizens. Toronto Zenith has never, ever been disqualified before because of our competence, our performance, or for any safety reasons. In response to this suspension, Toronto Zenith still strongly by its belief, as outlined in the many documents and minutes we have submitted, which I'm obviously not here to speak to, we have submitted. The infractions are not, we believe they're debatable, but if some were conceded, do not warrant the damage that the city's judgment could inflict upon the company's image and its employees' livelihood, especially once again published on this city webpage. As we previously noted in our documentation, all companies have quality control and safety incidents, but a good QC and safety culture and program is demonstrated by how a company manages those incidents and learns from them. We believe Toronto Zenith utilizes best practices and have sophisticated and well-developed processes that have helped us manage and develop a strong QC and safety culture throughout our history. I believe our clients would agree, and we invite you to talk to them or visit our sites. We also believe that Toronto Zenith met our contractual obligations for our City of Toronto contracts. On the Morningside project, we have tried to work with the city officials to reach an acceptable resolution to our disagreements since the completion of the contract. However, city staff have not wanted to use the contractual mediation process, which is their right. As a result, we've been obligated to commence a legal proceeding against the city on that particular contract. Toronto Zenith argues that the judgments and decisions for suspension in this case are subjective and may be personality-driven. We are not claiming to be perfect, but we do believe there are two sides to every story, and this story was not adjudicated objectively by a third party. Once again, we do not challenge your right to make this decision. You have the right who you want to work with. We just do not want to be publicly shamed for something that was not objectively judged. I would like the committee to note that since this process began in January of this year, we voluntarily removed ourselves from bidding while we made our case. Hence, I ask the committee to consider if this is punishment enough. In conclusion, we would respectfully ask the committee to not recommend bidding suspension for Toronto Zenith. However, if the City of Toronto decides to suspend us for a year, we ask for to consider not publishing on the internet, which I know is part of your process, but there's a point behind my message on this because it does affect reputation. Finally, I just want everybody to know I'm very involved in the construction industry, and Toronto Zenith is an active member with the Toronto Construction Association, the Ontario Road Builders, and the Heavy Construction Association of Toronto, HCAT. I am also currently a director of HCAT and the past president of HCAT. and would very much like to work with the city to improve on the culture of safety and quality in
You
construction.
could, you're over 5 minutes, if you could wrap up.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Any questions for the deputant? No? I'm just quickly going through the report here. Were any of your personnel injured or killed during this period?
Pardon?
I'm going through the report that's before us, and I'm just wondering whether any of your workers were injured or killed during this period.
Nobody's ever been, a knock on wood, or this is wood, but we've never had a death. There's always little minor injuries that are on a job site. I don't know the details, if there would be anything like, but we have a process for all that. I don't think we had any major injuries on these particular jobs.
Okay. And what's the length of your track record with the city? How long have you been working on contracts or bidding on contracts?
My gut would tell me, we've been here working in the city. I'm going to go 40 to 50. We've been around 60, but doing heavy civil construction, doing everything from little culverts to bridges to that kind of stuff. I'm going to say 40 to 60.
40 to 60 years?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the first time temporary suspension has ever come up?
With any owner ever in our life, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Any other questions for the deputant? Councillor Peruzza.
Have I read the report? Yes, I've read, we've gone through.
The report?
We believe that there's always safety incidents, is how you deal with issues. It's how they've been cataloged within the report, and the performance report, we believe it's been weighed. And I think, I'm not going to speak, it would have to be at another meeting with my staff and everything to get into details. So I'm really here to talk about reputation and everything like that. But I think we would have to go through, sitting in another room somewhere, going through detail line item by line item, you'd have to go.
So you're saying that you haven't done that yet? Like you?
We have, and we don't think we've had, but nobody, we may have done it with the city, but you're still, like, the city is still the judge. We haven't sat with a third party to say, okay, Toronto Zenith, I hear your point of view. City of Toronto, I hear your point of view. What we've done is we've sat there and they said, okay, Toronto Zenith, we've heard what you said, and the city disagrees with you. Which you actually have, I say you have the right to do that, to work with whoever you want.
Well, but I'm assuming that you've sat down with the staff prior to their producing this report, and a lot of the comments that are outlined here, I would imagine that they sat down with you, chatted with you about it, and said, look, this is a problem, right?
Yep.
We need to. They did, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And from that perspective, given that the report is in front of us and it's, it's.
Do you have all our
In my
counter
view-
arguments there? That's what I'm asking.
This is what I'm.
There's so much data. Can I tell you, you guys would have to sit here for 5-6 hours, or maybe 20 hours. Like, it would take you'd have to go through a lot of information to go through, and then where they put it in the performance report and how they document it in the performance report. There's a lot of stuff. That's why I said I'd have to sit there too with my staff and everything, and we'd have to go through. But they have a report. We have all minutes where we've rebutted and everything. So remember that there's lots of information out there.
And you think that the characterization in this report, that our staff is not accurately characterizing basically what's gone on?
I think there's always issues out on job sites. I think that should we be suspended from the City of Toronto? No. Are we perfect? No. No contractor is perfect, but we're a good contractor, and we have a process in place when incidents. I can walk on a job site and somebody won't have glasses, and they don't have safety glasses, and an incident actually happened. We document it. Sometimes and we record all these things. People are sometimes punished. Sometimes they're sent home for a day. Sometimes we have talks all across. Any time there's an incident on one job site, that goes through the whole company at all job sites. Everything is discussed and documented, and we have a process in place to learn from our mistakes too, because that's what a QC and safety program does, is things happened in construction, and we all know that. I think we've got a great record out there in the industry, and the only reason really that I'm here, because it's my job as the president and CEO, is, you know what, we haven't done, the one thing we haven't spent money on is public relations and internet presence. So one of the things I realized is we have 60 years of amazing stories, this company, and all of a sudden, Toronto Zenith suspended because we don't have an internet presence. 60 years of stories, one story, Toronto Zenith suspended, really affects our reputation. So that's the reason. Even though I know you guys got to be transparent, but I say there's something bigger here. And so that, because we haven't done it, so even I realized that some Sun reporter picked up on the story here, right? They put it in the thing, and already you Google Toronto Zenith, possible suspension, right? We've been at, our biggest thing here is, I understand we can sit back, I'd even sit back for another year and not work with the city. We have a great backlog of work. I want to work for the city in the future, but I'd rather say, look, we won't bid here for another year, and we won't come and work for you and take our punishment that way. The whole idea of publishing this, when it hasn't been really thoroughly vetted, hurts the reputation of a company that's been around for a long time. And that's why I'm here. And that's why I felt I had to come.
So I, as a politician who...
Last question, Councillor.
Yeah, who may or may not do something that, you know, inadvertently, and, you know, that's just the way social media is today. I get splashed all over the internet in a negative way. Like,
Yeah.
what makes it different for me as opposed to you? So for me, it's just my name. For you, it may cost you money with...
But it's, and my name, you know what, my name's really important to me. That's our brand is, our word is concrete. We're supposed to be people that shake hands, and we do according to contract.
But my name is really important to me, and I got no...
No, but I actually, I'm not disputing, that's the reason I came here, so at least I could state my case and it could be published. Let's just cut to the, like, that's why I'm here, is I believe we're a great company. We have a strong reputation. We have a great safety record, and I'm involved in the industry, and it's really important because I have to address other people in the industry about this.
Okay. Any other questions for the deputant? Councillor Nunziata?
I just have one question. So on page 7 of the staff report, it is a fact that in August of 2015 and April 2015, that you did receive a stop work order by the Ministry of Labor, correct?
Can you tell me what the incident was for? It might.
It's in the report.
Yeah, it happened because the crane went up. I think this could be the issue, and don't, like, that's why I really need, like, this, we've got millions of dollars worth of work or whatever out there, but I think on that issue, there was our boom truck. If it was a thing where it went up, I think there would have been an incident, it might have hit a wire, there was something where it hit a wire, and I think we would call the Ministry of Labor, tell them that there was an issue, they came. I don't know if that's the incident, though. This is a job, are you talking about the Morningside job?
I'm just reading the staff
Yeah,
report.
can I tell you,
You indicated that you read the report.
Yeah.
So I'm just quoting what's in the report. So is it correct?
I need
Yeah.
to go through the details. I actually started with this, so I prefer then not to answer any details in the report. I'd be willing to sit with staff, people, whatever, and go through details, but not here.
Okay. Any other questions of the deputant? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions for staff? Speakers. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong.
So I'm going to move the staff recommendations, you know, based on the, firstly, we don't get a lot of these reports to this committee, and usually when a contractor is given a timeout for a year, there's a pretty good reason for it, and I think staff have done a pretty substantial job outlining the multiple instances in which the contractor was not practicing construction methods that, let's say, that the city would stand behind or be proud of. I also have full confidence in the author of the report, Michael Dandria, that that this should be done. I know he takes it seriously, and we take it seriously too. The deputant did not in any way substantially refute any of the contents of the report, so I take that information as true. And so I think, this should be a slam dunk for this committee. And I think that the company that's being suspended should take this 1 year and consider whether they want to continue to bid on contracts after that year's over and how they want to conduct themselves in the future.
All right. I've had a request from a committee member for questions for staff, so we're going to have to deviate from the procedures. Yeah, if we could keep it short. I did ask. Did I move too quickly? Maybe. So you're the... Okay. Yeah, so, Councilor Perza, you said you have...
Mr. Chair, in all fairness, you're in the chair, he's not in the chair. Well, he should move from here to there, and then he can make up his rules as he goes, right?
okay, so
I'm asking you, I'm not asking him.
I have deviated the procedures.
But I'm asking you, I'm not asking him.
And I have said, yes, you can ask, and you're asking a question. Councilor Peruz, I should point out, it was you who said you had one small question. Those were your words.
point of order. I'm going to move to be very proceedings to open up question again, so Councilor Cruz can ask one question. One?
That's 12 words or less.
No, I'll let him use as many as he wants. That's the type of generous guy that I am. All right?
We have the word of a committee.
Move over, James. Move over.
Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, I'm not going to agree to that to nonsense motions.
Okay, let's go.
No, it's not a legitimate motion. Councilor Peruzza has assured us he has one small question. Councilor Peruzza, please ask your question and put us out of our misery.
Through the chair, yes, they are.
And why wouldn't, like, the scaffold systems, the missing planks, like, where's the union in all of this?
Through the chair, ultimately, it's the contractor's responsibility to adhere to occupational and health and safety requirements. They are ultimately responsible for the health and safety of their workers, as well as the safety of the public to which they might be impacting through their work.
Thank you, Councilor Peruzza. Now that we've varied the procedure for questions, are there any other questions for staff?
No.
No, we're good. So we've started the speakers. Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong has moved staff recommendations on the item. Are there any other speakers on the item? Councillor Cole.
Yes, I concur with Councilor Minnan-Wong that, the staff, don't do this very lightly, and they've done a thorough report here, and in no way do I want to question what staff did. The only thing I think the applicant, the deputant, brought up is this harm to the reputation of the company. I don't think our policy really is there to essentially attack the reputation of a company that's been in business for over 60 years and probably doing business with the city for 40 years. And certainly there needs to be some kind of reprimand, there needs to be some kind of sanction for the obvious failings in the situation and the construction. But on the other hand, I just find that there seems to be like a death penalty here without some kind of intermediary point where there could be, like even the deputant said he's willing to withdraw any effort to undertake any contracts with the city for the year. but as soon as you put this on the website, or put it out to the public realm, all of a sudden, this company's reputation is harmed, and it is something that I find a bit difficult to accept, this arbitrary method, that there should be an intermediate step, perhaps, of a sanction, but not essentially giving this company now a black mark that is really, I think, beyond my capacity to sort of judge. But again, my gut feeling is that this is not, the fair way of dealing with this. We have to have a sanction, but there's got to be a better way than just all of a sudden, having this verdict. So I think the applicant made a couple good, but he's here for his reputation. He's not here really, I think, contradicting the staff report at all. He's saying, yes, there probably are things that have happened that shouldn't have happened, but on the other hand, should we essentially engage in this judicial death penalty here for a company that obviously has been around and has, if you last this long in construction, you must be doing, and it's a unionized company to boot. There's a lot of good that they've done over the years. I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These contracts are more than $30 million in work, and while we may not have the ability to fully judge all of the work that's undertaken because we're not managing on a day-to-day basis, we do need to trust our city staff that manage these multi-million-dollar contracts. And the best way for our contractors to protect their reputation is to deliver on time, on budget, and safely. And so if staff are making recommendations that there is a problem with a contractor, then we need to trust their expert advice as the project managers and the contract managers behind this work and fully support them. So I will fully support them here today.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Any other speakers? Councillor Layton.
Thank you very much. I'll be supporting the staff recommendations that are ahead of us. I too, like Councillor Cole and others, don't believe that our staff take this lightly. This isn't, as I don't believe, personality driven, as was insinuated by the deputant. I was involved in one contract that got a 2-year suspension just a couple of years ago for good reason. And very good reason, and they fought every step of the way, us enforcing our contract. If we don't demonstrate that the city is serious about enforcing the contract, then what good are all the clauses we put in them? Contractors will just continue to breach the conditions of them and try to skirt their responsibility to both the workers as well as to the city. In the case of the contract that we had problems with, it was their quality of their work and not the safety of residents or their workers. I understand that this could have some reputational impact, but wouldn't we want other municipalities to report out on which contractors were performing to the standard that we would want, so that we could put that in part of our vetting process? I do believe there will be a lot of opportunities for this contractor to redeem themselves and look, if it has the reputational impact that this contractor fears, I have no doubt that the city will have some little litigation with them. And it'll be up to the city to defend its position that we are simply taking the steps that are within our regular processes, which perhaps get reviewed on occasion on whether or not these are made public or when they are. But it's important for us to demonstrate that we are willing and we are consistently implementing our policies and holding contractors and everyone we do business with to account. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Councillor Perruzza.
I'm also going to support the report that's in front of us. support it because I understand that we have a lot of work out there. We have a lot of contractors. And the reality is that it's an environment now where the folks out there get to call the shots with us. They really do. And I saw it firsthand at the corner of Keel and Finch when they were building the subway with one of the contractors right there in front of us. You know, asked for lane closures, dumped some concrete things, blocked the road. We gave them the permission to do it. They promised they would do it within weeks. They stretched it out for months and months and months, and they're in a position to really sort of squeeze us hard on all these things, and they do it. I get that. I also look at this report and I say to myself, could any other contractor out there, any other place, have a scaffold system that wasn't fully functional, didn't have a plank on their thing, didn't have a worker with eyeglasses, that some mobile crane operator pulled up on a construction site, didn't notice the overhead wires while he was chatting and extended his boom, and all of a sudden somebody was there to sort of hammer him home. I get it. I get that this is all to some degree objective, and sometimes you say, okay, we'll let this one go, and sometimes you'll say, no, we're not going to let the other one go, because that's the reality of the real world, right? But for it to have gotten here and in this way, I think that we have no choice but to say, you know what, too bad, so sad. Yeah, you take the suspension. Now we have internet, there's cyberspace. Yeah, your reputation's going to take a hit like everybody else. You promised you would do some things, you didn't do them, and you're going to pay, the small little price for that. At the end of the day, it's a 1-year suspension, and yeah, they'll get on the internet, and I don't know what the city of Mississauga, if they do work in Mississauga, will look at that and say, I didn't know that. I'm not sure that it'll have as an egregious an impact as the person who appeared before the committee said. But I also I look at this and I look at it with with a grain of salt. This isn't probably something that isn't happening with other folks out there. Maybe not to this extent, but I can tell you it's a very difficult climate. But we need to send a message. Your stuff has to. If you've promised you're going to work for us, the work. You have to do it in a way that's safe. You have to train your workers. If some guy comes on there and is not clearly familiar with the rules, then you're going to have to spend a little time to make sure that they're familiar with health and safety, and that they take health and safety seriously. Because at the end of the day, we're going to have to take it seriously, and we'd be remiss if we didn't do that. If we looked at this and just simply said, you know what, we're just going to close a blind eye to this and let it go, because I don't think you can let it go, and that's why I'm going to support the staff recommendations that are in front of us.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Perruzza. I think everything that should be said has been said. Deputy Mayor Min Wong has moved the staff recommendations. We'll put that to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 3, non-competitive contract with Code for Canada on the development of a data platform for traffic collision volume data, held by Deputy Mayor Min Wong. Don't have any deputants on the item. Questions for staff?
So, can you tell me what this data platform is how it's going to make our lives better?
Through the chair, we have legacy systems to track 2 critical pieces of data for the division. One is volumes of traffic, and the other is crashes. Those systems have been in place since the early 1990s, and they are in dire need of being upgraded. When we were faced with the issue of upgrading them not too long ago, we had a number of conversations about the best way to do that. As we were going through our reorganization, we believed that it was a good idea to try to bring in some expertise through Code for Canada, and we coordinated with them. We got some advice and input from both IT and Civic Hall at that time. time, and we brought that team in to help develop a new and functional system, which they've done up to a point. This contract would be to extend their term in order to finish it and work with IT on sustainment to move it forward.
So, do we get regular reports on the number of crashes?
Through the chair, we do, and we work with the Toronto Police. There's lots of
Right,
manual.
when you just say
there's lots of.
who do you define as we?
The Transportation Division does track that information along with the police. We have a lot of manual reporting and data collection that's required in order to make those reports useful.
Okay, so I've never seen, so you may get them. I mean, council, does council ever receive? So I don't know, in terms of volume of traffic and crashes, have we ever seen a report that reflects that data?
So all the reports that we produce for the council on our open data site, we make that data available. It's on the police's website in terms of crash information. We partner with them on that. So it's a lot of the back end information that we use to get the data-driven information that we provide to do various reports.
Have you ever generated a report for this committee that reflected the volume and the crashes?
Many. The last Vision Zero 2.0 report had information in it that was generated definitely from crash, because that's where we get all our killed and serious injury crashes.
So when was the last report generated?
That was in July, but I believe that, did we use it for the, yeah, I think Vision Zero 2.0, probably we used it for the cycling network plan. I wouldn't, certainly we're going to be using it for the congestion management plan update that we bring in March. And if others want to add to.
So that reflects the number of incidents where car meets person or car meets car?
Correct. Any crash, especially if it's a killed or serious injury crash.
And does that just doesn't, does that ever come as a separate report? Just, I mean, it could be embedded within like Vision Zero, that we see voluminous pieces of paper.
Well, through the chair, our New Vision Zero website and dashboard is also fed from information that comes from those databases. Again, the interest in what we've seen already is trying to automate that information, makes it less cumbersome for people to be able to have to do double entry of data. It makes it more available, because those are data points that most of my staff should be using when they're making any determinations about the work that they do.
Anyway, Mr. Chair, I was just thinking that we should get exclusive of Vision Zeros, like periodic updates. Congestion's a big issue, Mr. Chair, and I would just like to see the bare numbers, just so we kind of see on, some graphs maybe on how we're doing.
Do you want to
Seasonally,
draft
I'm just
a quick
saying that.
motion to
Secondly-
ask for quarterly reports
Yeah,
on this item and not have them embedded in a Vision Zero update?
Yeah.
I mean,
Through
Oh,
the,
thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have another question. So you say, so this tracks the number of, let's say, volume and the crashes, but you say all this information is manually inputted. So if it's all manually inputted, what do we need a platform when you're just putting into a spreadsheet?
Yeah, through the chair. So we have processes that ingest volume and collision data into this platform, into this backend database.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't understand what he just said.
Sorry, just to clarify, so we have,
Well, it eats, that's what I mean by.
well, it's a
No, I just don't, I mean, if he could, no disrespect intended.
Intake, it's a
If you could use
euphemism.
sort of common language so we could understand what you're talking about. Canadian Tire English, that's a good word.
so we have processes that automatically bring in data, collision data and volume data. So we get volume data predominantly from vendors that conduct traffic counts for us. We also have an automated process for bringing in data from the police and from the collision reporting centers. But there are manual aspects to those processes. So any sort of validation task is predominantly done manually. If there are errors with the data, those are fixed manually. And so a lot of the work that's being done as part of this project is to more efficiently automate these processes so that they're not those sort of manual validation and correction tasks done by staff.
takes a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time, yeah.
So, Mr. Chair, so you said you have vendors that collect volume. Who are those vendors?
Yeah, sorry.
There are a number of vendors that we get through competitive contract. I don't, do you know the name? Is it on OT?
Through the chair, OTI, Lee Consulting, Pyramid Traffic, there's a number of vendors that.
Where do they get that info? I mean, don't they get it off of our, how do they measure the volumes? Is this, they pull it?
Through the chair, what they would do is we would put a request in for a volume count at an intersection. There's a number of ways they would do it. One is they would put one of those electronic counters up on one of the poles that would be using video analytics or radar to basically detect and count the vehicles or the pedestrians. Or in some cases, some of the vendors would do manual counts if necessary.
So I always thought that we did.
Yeah, last question, and I did start the clock late, so you've actually got some bonus time there, but last question.
It's the bonus time. I always thought that we did those counts. So we get that from other organizations. We don't do those counts ourselves?
Through the chair, we have a combination of both. So we have legacy staff that if there's like an urgent need to have a count done, we would send an individual out. But quite frankly, as of today, I think we've only got one individual left in that category. Over the years, we've been always moving towards contracted services, similar to other jurisdictions when it comes to collecting data.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor Wong. Councillor McKelvey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the report, you discussed that this will be helpful for decision-making with Vision Zero. Could you just explain to us how?
Through the chair, in a number of ways, especially on the crash side of the equation, in having more understanding and knowledge and up-to-the-minute information on crashes, not only by mode, but also by location as well. And this database that we're building now is going to feed the Vision Zero website. So there's a new Vision Zero map that is available and updated on a very frequent basis. It's pretty much real-time information. And some of that information would be certainly made more straightforward and benefited by this transition. In the other case, on the speed side and the volume side, we certainly need updated information every time we approach a design for a roadway. We look at updated information. We often have to go out and get that count data. Very often, the people who we would like to see that information is somewhat limited to the project team because it has not been very easy to generate reports for the rest of the staff, and we want to make it available not only to the full complement of our staff, but use it for other technology applications in partnership with IT, like the Vision Zero dashboard and map that's recently been updated that I described, and others in via open data as well.
So is this mostly a database as opposed to like predictive modeling?
Through the chair, so the database is one aspect of it, but there are a number of other aspects to this project. So one piece is sort of the front-end application, so how staff would access the data and how they would analyze the data. The other aspect of this is sort of reimagining the processes from start to finish. So how we get the data from our partners, how staff interact with that data, what are the processes that they use in their everyday tasks to complete their work. So this is a reimagination of everything from start to finish on how staff deal with the data, both from data collection, but also from how they analyze the data and make recommendations as it relates to the Vision Zero program.
So is there any interface or thought to move towards an interface that does do more on the predictive side, but also that can bring in data, like, for example, through wayfinding apps and things like that are generating huge amounts of data about driver patterns and behavior? Are we mining that data and using that in our decision-making process?
Through the chair, yes, that is something, as per the last Vision Zero 2.0 report, a large emphasis area was around using predictive analytics to better plan our interventions. And so the creation of this platform will facilitate that sort of work moving forward. And we can bring in those data sets into this platform through work that both our staff does moving forward, as well as other data sets that might be available on the marketplace.
So is there a work plan, for example, or a long-term strategic plan that says how you can, use this database as a starting point, but how you plan to grow, over the years, incorporating new data from, for example, wayfinding apps and then data and new methodologies through things like AI? Like, is there, it looks like we've used the same platform since the 1990s. So like, how do we see that this platform is like a starting point as opposed to an endpoint that we'll be using 20 years from now again?
Yeah, so the whole idea behind developing this platform is that it is something that we can continue to iterate on, to continue to build on as our needs change in the future. So we're not stuck with a software platform that is static. It's something that we own internally and that we can continue to build on as our needs evolve over time.
So you're confident that this new platform then is both nimble and flexible to adapt to new technologies, but yet also robust enough that it has the quality that you need?
Through the chair, yes, we are building this platform in a modular fashion so that we can swap modules in and out as needed without having to recreate the whole system.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Councillor Layton.
Just very quickly, we do manual data collection on right now, like we're doing it manually. We're looking at a spreadsheet from the police and from what we know. How does that exactly work?
Through the chair, we have a combination of automated and manual data collection. So our traffic volume data collection is predominantly done through vendors, and so that data makes its way into our database using an automated process, but there are manual aspects to that data collection. As far as the crash data is concerned, that also comes in automatically from the police, but a lot of the validation tasks are manual, and that's sort of the intent of this data platform, is to help alleviate some of those tasks so that staff can free up time for other more fruitful work.
Great, thank you. And if I could just ask, because I'm preparing a motion on another item, when's the congestion management plan coming back next term?
Through the chair, we will be back with the next 5-year congestion management plan in March of 2020. So we're in the process of preparing it right now.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other questions for staff? I just have a couple of quick ones. We don't collect data on 400 series highways, or do we?
Through the chair, since the 400 series highways are the jurisdiction of the province, we don't actually collect data, although we do have access to that data from the province.
All right, so when we get statistics at this committee or at council, they do not include collisions, accidents, injuries on 400 series highways.
Through the chair, it all depends, like if on the analysis that's being done, whether or not it's relevant to the analysis. I mean, we do have access to the data, and we will obtain that data from the province if and when necessary for that specific analysis.
Is there any way that our numbers are inflated because of the embedding of 400 series highways collisions?
Through the chair, no. So our statistics are specifically only relevant to Toronto jurisdiction.
Toronto streets.
Yeah.
So I'm sure many of us seen a multi-vehicle collision where there's police on the scene and ambulances and sometimes fire. It's pretty chaotic trying to figure out who's been injured, whether there are any fatalities, moving people from, bless you, from vehicles to ambulances and sending them to various local hospitals. How do we actually track data from such a chaotic scene, moving them from ambulance to hospital? Maybe they're admitted to hospital because of injuries. Maybe someone is dead at the scene or dies within a few days. How on earth do you track all those moving targets to give us the data we need to make decisions? And how does this software help that?
Well, I'd be happy to answer the first part of that. The police track the on-scene and collect the data on scene. Depending on the severity of the crash, they will often take a pretty extended period of time to do the type of analysis that's necessary to ensure they have all the evidence and information that they need. I believe they also work collaboratively with the hospitals because, as you know, those numbers have to get verified, and part of the reason they get verified is because people's conditions change over time. And so those numbers do get updated, which is why we keep a running track of that. In terms of how that information comes to us, as Akash mentioned, there's some automated processes, and then there's some manual validation that needs to occur in terms of transferring that information from police to our databases so that we can utilize it.
So police would have access to the medical conditions of persons involved in accidents or collisions?
Through the chair, we have it in discussion with the trauma centers. They would be the ones that would have access to that sort of information. And so there have been sort of plans put in place that we would theoretically have access to that data to then try and marry that up with the data that we get from the police as well. The issue has been obviously with respect to privacy in that data and how to go about basically redacting information that we get, the valuable information that we need for the analysis without compromising anything with respect to public privacy.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Okay. We have any other speakers? Any other speakers? All right, so we have one motion and then the item. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That is carried. And the item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. All right, we're on the congestion management plan. We have deputations on this item. Hamish Wilson.
Good morning. Thanks for hauling in. There's a lot of work that's gone into this. Well done. However, I think it's got some fundamental issues in that, surprise, surprise, I think we're not really focusing on what the actual problem is, which is that we've got too much of a car-based mobility system. Going back a few years, you know, the #1 cause here was listed the Gardner Expressway, but also something from Frederick Gardner here from 1957, and I think the lesson still has to be learned. His comment, there is no mystery about what has caused the problem. There are 5 million motor vehicles in Canada, 500,000 of which are domiciled in metropolitan Toronto. The cars are what are creating the congestion. And they take up a lot of space, and we should know how to do things better. Here's something from Vancouver. When you cater to the car, they take up a lot of space, don't give us good mobility as could be. The bus takes up a lot less room. And better transit, two-way bike lane moves a lot of people. Bike lane with a dedicated lane or a bus lane and a dedicated lane, and then finally transit, very effective. So if we really want to actually bust congestion, we should be doing effective transit. Lowering speed is actually a helpful thing to do to improve, provide some congestion relief as well. This is from spacing, and what they did, they compared the amount of space that's required for a faster moving vehicle with slower moving vehicles and modes. And the larger balloon here, I'm sorry I didn't bring down the color copy, that takes up a lot of space when you have cars moving quickly. And it's consumption of public space that's costly to provide as well. So the slower speeds actually improve efficiencies, improve the congestion, it's a function of congestion relief as well. And in terms of providing better transit, That's dismal, and it's not all your fault. I'm sorry. It's everybody's fault going back decades. Now we're talking. Mr. Ford has taken over with the Ontario line, but that's only half of what was proposed in 1957, reaching out to Islington, which is pretty disappointing because, in terms of relieving the Gardiner, which is the number one thing. This is such a pinch point at the base of High Park here. If we provided faster transit in somehow into the core, that's a huge step forward to actually making sure that we had less car traffic in the core. And hopefully that'll make it safer as well. So yeah, it's dismal. I know transit is a hot button issue, sigh. I wish we could focus on providing surface transit in unused and underused corridors. It doesn't have to be a subway for effective transit because that actually takes a lot of capital to build subways when they're not in the right places. But surface transit, including, say, up through the Don Valley. You want to make sure that Councillor Minnan-Wong is able to take a quick trip in from his ward. I think that surface relief would be quite possible through the Don Valley, and there are plans to do that. The cars are very helpful. They take up a lot of space. They are a serial killer, so we've got to make sure that we provide better transit as the real means of addressing the congestion.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Councillor Cole.
Could you put up the Big Daddy quote again, please?
Yes, sir. Where are we? Back here.
The former reeve of Forest Hill Village. Okay. When was this, Hamish?
1957.
So, okay, and as you know, Big Daddy helped build the city, and he had a lot of vision for the city. On the other hand, no, but Milton was there. I just want to ask a question. So in 1957, you said there was 500,000 cars, right?
Yes. That's,
and so
yes.
How many registered vehicles are there in Toronto today?
I believe it's, when we had the vehicle registration tax, it raised $60 million, $60 a car, so 1 million cars, more or less, not including, I think it's maybe 300,000 that come in every day. I'm not sure of what that figure is. But there's a lot of, there's a significant influx still
coming in,
crossing the boundaries.
So you say 1 million cars?
1 million cars.
Registered in the city of Toronto?
That's from when we had the vehicle registration.
Yeah, because I know I've asked staff to give me that, I'll ask them in a minute, to give me the numbers on the number of registered motor vehicles in the city of Toronto. Yeah, and so, and I guess your premise, or Big Daddy is part of it, I guess, is saying that if there are, cars are slowed down, does it help congestion, or I'm not sure, or makes it safer, or what's the premise there?
Well, slowing the cars down, I think it makes it safer, but also increases the relative efficiency of the use of the road space when it's when they're moving. But the real efficiency comes with providing better biking, better transit, especially better transit, and the sub-regional better transit is what's really sorely lacking here. User pay for cars would help too.
Yes, and because there's a two-edged sword there to the slowing cars down, because certainly all the congestion does slow cars down, but the problem is it makes the streets very unsafe for cyclists or pedestrians and everybody else, and creates a lot of anxiety, high anxiety on our roads. I had someone give me the finger the other day going up. I don't know what the heck I did, but the other question I have is, don't you think part of the problem we have here in this city over the last number of years is that there's such an emphasis on mass transit vanity projects like the Ontario line and all this, yet nobody talks about the Dufferin bus. You know, why don't we spend more time talking about the most used, one of the most used, I think we carry more people in the Dufferin bus than the Scarborough RT, than probably the SkyTrain in Vancouver. All these, you know, the new projected billions we're going to spend on the Finch line, all this. Why do you think we spend so little time appreciating the value of the Dufferin bus?
Well, the Dufferin bus is a real problem. I was pleased to see yesterday there is an express bus. I hope it's not at the same double fare. I hope it's at the same fare.
It is the same.
But that gets to the example or the problem of how we are misplacing our billions worth of expenditure to the vanity project. And I think part of it is because we're dominated, the core is dominated with some respect by the more suburban car-oriented politicians and areas. For instance, like going back a few decades, what is this, 19, you know, there's the Relief plus Queen again. It was outvoted in favor of doing things out in the suburbs. So that's part of our problem, and it's also that the more senior governments also are keener on having stuff that's bigger and helps the outer-lying regions that tend to vote for them as well. Not always. It's a real mess. But just speeding up the cars isn't helpful as a cyclist on Queen. I didn't mention this in the deputation, but number two here on one of the lists is to speed things up and remove the pinch points. But if you ever try cycling along Queen Street, which is the same narrow width as Dufferin, it's bloody dangerous and frightening. And the road is in really rough shape as well. So in terms of terror-inducing feelings and the tension, try cycling on Queen or on Dufferin. Dufferin is one of the streets, because it's so narrow, again, I tend to avoid, even though it's a bit smoother in some portions. We do have a set of issues with how we do transit. It got a lot worse under Mr. Ford. Fordwards is very backwards.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're well over 5 minutes. Any other questions for the deputant? Quite fascinating that the same arguments we were having in 1957 we're having today. We're 60 years later. Johnny Dibb?
He's not here.
Andrew Shirkus. Great. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Andrew Shirkus. I recently co-founded a software company here in Toronto called Roundtrip.ai with the goal of helping cities leverage connected vehicles and software to better understand and manage congestion. A friend recommended that I make a deputation given the congestion master plan is being discussed here today. To be honest, I didn't even know what the word deputation meant until Monday, so apologies in advance. I've never done this sort of thing before, but here I am. The overall vision of the congestion master plan is, quote, through innovation and technology, maximize the safety, efficiency, reliability, and sustainability of the transportation network for all users while reducing the impact on the environment. I love it. Being a software engineer, and I promise I'll keep the jargon to a minimum, I'm a huge proponent of defining metrics and using data to track system performance. In many ways, a transportation network reminds me of the large, complicated software systems I've had the opportunity to work on over the last decade. When it comes to improving system performance, the golden rule is always measure first, then optimize. To this extent, I'm pleased to see the congestion management plan includes agreements for commercial traffic data and that the upcoming plan includes emphasis on measuring performance and success KPIs. All that being said, when I read through the current plan, I noticed there was little mention of freight. Urban freight deliveries have skyrocketed over the last decade, largely in part due to e-commerce. For example, Canada Post has seen parcel deliveries go from 159 million to 269 million per year in the last decade alone. It's a 69% increase with little signs of slowing down. A report published in the Transportation Research Board determined that pickup and delivery activities are the third largest cause of congestion, below crashes and construction, but above breakdowns and bad weather. And while the city can't control accidents or the weather, it can do something about how deliveries happen, whether it's the creation of delivery parking, use of technology, changing of local bylaws, or enforcement thereof. I understand that the related curbside management and freight and goods movement strategies exist to investigate this issue, but given urban freight is a significant cause of congestion and pollution that is only getting worse, I'd love to see what sort of proactive use of data and technology we could be doing today. For example, Toronto Municipal Code Chapter 546, licensing of vehicles for hire, requires private transportation companies such as Uber and Lyft to submit data to the city. This data was used by Toronto's Big Data Innovation Team to produce their report on the transportation impacts of vehicle for hire in the City of Toronto. The recent review of Chapter 546 now requires taxi and limousine companies to submit additional vehicle and trip data to the city for, quote, initiatives related to audit and compliance, transportation planning, and consideration for an environmental incentive program. In a world where nearly every delivery vehicle is connected and delivery routes are computer-generated and logged, I'm curious whether similar data reporting requirements could be created with similar goals of audit, compliance, planning, and offering environmental incentives. All the exciting proposals and ideas I've read in the Congestion Master Plan, the Curbside Management Strategy, and the Freight and Goods Movement Strategy would strongly benefit from using this additional data to measure first, then optimize. Maybe even using that new platform we just talked about. In advance of the Congestion Master Plan update set to be delivered in March of 2020, I'd recommend the city to be a leader, work with industry, and investigate whether similar data reporting requirements for commercial delivery fleets could be enacted sooner to bolster future planned pilots, policy changes, delivery innovations, performance metrics for transportation services in a way that balances privacy, supports economic activity in the city, and eases congestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shirkus. Any questions for the deputants? Councillor Cole?
You did very well for a person that didn't even know the meaning of the word deputation. I think you were pulling our leg, but anyway, I just think you brought up a very salient point, and that is the impact of urban freight and what impact it has on our congestion. Do you want to just explain that a bit more?
Right. So one of my favorite activities to do walking around downtown Toronto is to look at every single double parked or illegally parked delivery van and just ask the driver, like, hey, what's going on? Like, is this okay with you? Like, do you have any options? And essentially, if you double park during peak hours, you're blocking a whole lane of traffic for congestion. And it increases fuel consumption costs, right? It's kind of like a lose-lose.
And don't you find that a lot of the urban freight is like overkill? I mean, I see these big, huge UPS trucks dropping off a little box of, soap or something to somebody's house and parked on the sidewalk. Why do they always have to use these mega trucks to deliver little cardboard boxes?
Yeah. I think myself included, I love my next day shipping, right? And if I get my box of soap, that's great, right? But I think it has an impact on everyone that we're not noticing.
Why should it have to come in these big, huge trucks?
I don't know, but I think collecting some data to understand package delivery type and actually figuring out maybe different pilots. It's one way to try it out. It's experimentation.
I'm going to move a motion with Councillor Layton on trying to get some data on this. Then the other thing is, what is the impact of all the people that are doing this online eating? They're sitting at home. They don't want to walk down the street to McDonald's, so they phone Uber or Lyft, Councillor Pruitt's friends there, and they drive down. Somebody drives in their car, picking up the Big Mac and then delivers it to their door in a big SUV with a little package of the Big Mac. So do you think that contributes to the congestion in our city?
I would collect the data first.
just to see what the, so you're,
That's the engineer in me. It's like, I'm not gonna, I can have an hypothesis, but I'd like to look at the data.
so you think the examination of the impact of all this online shopping and online delivery and of everything from Big Macs to soap to groceries, you know, like, have you ever seen these gateway grocery trucks,
Yeah.
the size of them?
Yeah.
So they deliver a little package of carrots in a big truck.
So,
Anyway, so we're going to follow your suggestion there, that we get some maybe data on this.
okay, thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other questions for the deputant? Councillor Perusa.
Just, I often sit here and I ask myself, why are we spending so much money, all this like mega millions, on incorporating all this technology, going out on the highway, putting up these little things to measure the speed of cars on the Gardner, and then, you know, and I don't know what benefit we get from that. I guess you get to put us up on some sign that your trip to Yonge Street will take you now 9 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on where you are. And then that breaks down, and then you got to send out a guy there to take it off the pole and put it back on. And then that technology changes, and there's so many different outfits out there generating this stuff. And I guess asking the question of somebody who would be an obvious beneficiary of any investments we make in that kind of data collection. What's the benefit to it? Like, do we get a return on our money, like a real return?
I probably can't speak to that, but I think in simple terms, the way I look at it is you pass a bylaw to have taxi and limousines and private transportation companies just hand over the data, such as like the big data team can analyze. So I look at it as a data source that we're not using today, and if there was a way to kind of collect and analyze that data, it wouldn't involve setting up a lot of physical infrastructure, right? The data is already sitting there. We just haven't asked for it.
So hold on. So what you're saying is that maybe we shouldn't be spending all that money on that, given that the data is being produced by so many different sources anyways?
I'm not like a huge transportation background planner, so I just kind of more approach it as it'd be good to just kind of cross-reference that data, right? You can look at one source and compare it to the sources we already have, and perhaps draw some future plans from that. But I can't speak to about.
Okay. So for example, now we're spending big money like on these, censored stoplights or intersections, right? You know, you come up as a pedestrian to an intersection. I'm assuming that there's now sensors on some of them that will sense that you're there, and then they will start to activate, sort of the light changes that you're going to need to, I don't know, cross the street. Like, is there a benefit to the sensor versus just the standard traffic lights that at some point just changes and allows you to cross the street, right? Like, the difference is hundreds of thousands of dollars for the simple light versus the more complicated one.
He's not a staff member. I mean,
No, but he's someone who benefits from this stuff, and I just want to know, if you've heard him, he just said, you know what, all that information is out there, like, why are you guys doing it for? If I didn't...
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
What's the question?
He interrupted. I did ask the question.
Come back if we don't ask him an actual.
you're scaring the poor guy.
No, this is fine.
That's fine. No worries. Thanks.
Are you done? Good. Any other questions for this poor deputant here?
Thank you for coming.
No, this has been a blast. Thank you. I do, and I know how city council works. This is great.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is anyone else here to speak on this item, item 4, congestion management plan? If not, we will go to questions for staff. Councillor Nunziata?
Yes, thank you. So as far as congestion, in air quality. I just did actually an open house, and I have another one tonight to talk about air quality in my ward, and it was very surprising. The north end of my ward, Akil and Jane, where we have the 400 and 401, the two highways interconnecting, is the highest as far as congestion and air quality. I know it's the province that is responsible for the highways, but like, what is it that we can do as far as the congestion that we do have, where you have the highways interconnecting, going into residential streets, and which causes a lot of congestion? Like,
Through the
I know
chair.
we can't force the province, but what can we do?
Yeah, through the chair,
Okay.
it would most certainly have to be a collaborative effort between ourselves and the province, but there are strategies we've seen in other jurisdictions, for example, ramp metering, which basically so it's basically putting traffic signals at the end of the freeway ramp to sort of control the flow of traffic onto and off the freeway. And so in other jurisdictions where they've implemented this successfully, they found that it has resulted in...
I can't really hear you. I don't know,
Oh,
maybe your mic is not working properly, sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Is that better? Yeah, maybe too far from the mic. Apologies. Yeah, so in other jurisdictions, we found that there's an approach called ramp metering, essentially adding traffic signals to the end of the freeway on-ramps to meter the traffic going onto and off the freeway, and it's the same extent to balance that with the flow of traffic in the arterial neighborhood. There's also corridor traffic management, which is kind of the same sort of idea. Both of these strategies are things that we could reach out to the province and see if we could work together collaboratively to implement them. And ultimately, to your point, easing the congestion in and around the sort of freeway corridor has an immediate impact in terms of reductions of environmental emissions.
So,
Can I just add to that
yeah.
through the chair? I just wanted to say that part of this congestion management plan, one of the big pieces was retiming signals on key arterial corridors. So while it doesn't address the MTO highways specifically, it certainly addresses some of the key arterials that I also know cut through the city. And there is a greenhouse gas emissions reduction as part of that timing of those signals along those corridors that we have reported in the report and will update as part of the congestion management plan update that we're bringing to council in March.
Yeah, so two of the corridors in my ward, the north end of my ward, is Jane and Keel, where you have the 400 and 401 coming out, in which you have thousands of cars. Would we be able to track the vehicles that are coming off the highways, those highways, if they're taking shortcuts to go through the, the community, or, they're... Is there any way we can track that when we're doing a traffic plan?
Through the chair,
Because a lot of people would get off the ramps to take a shortcut, because if the 401 is bumper to bumper, or the 400, and just go through our streets and as a shortcut to get off the highways and then get back on, right?
through the chair, I've seen white papers done with respect to using Bluetooth data for origin destination sort of studies and tracking. Aside from that, there are other approaches like manual approaches to basically doing license plate documentation, that kind of thing. But certainly those are things we could look at, though.
Yeah, okay, thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Councillor Cole.
Yeah, I just want to get to the deputant's issue there about the impact of urban freight delivery and the impact of the online shopping and the delivery of the online shopping goods, whether they be done by Uber, delivering the McDonald's, or whether it be by Gateway or in all these other companies. Is there any data on the impact, if any, that has on congestion on Toronto roads?
Through the chair, so I'll start to say that we are partnering with a regional effort, the Smart Freight Center, which includes the Region of Peel, the region of Durham and York, as well as the universities to address some of these key issues about what data we should be examining, changes in how deliveries are occurring, what's the biggest trends in the industry, and what data is not only useful to the City of Toronto, but certainly useful more broadly in tracking freight, which is definitely a regional issue. We're also in the process next year of we're going to be delivering a freight and goods movement strategy, which will be able to, I think, articulate a little bit more clearly some next steps for that. And I'm going to let Akash talk a little bit about existing data, because I do believe there are some significant limitations currently in what data we can require and how we can use it.
So through the chair, we do have data sets that allow us to track overall congestion trends, but we do not currently have access to data that depicts how individual freight companies are moving through our network. And so that might change through initiatives such as the Smart Freight Center, but at the moment we are not collecting that data directly from freight companies.
Are you familiar with the report by New York City in terms of the impact of online shopping delivery and the impact it's had on the City of New York?
Through the chair, I just yesterday, I think, read an article in the New York Times about their actions they have taken curbside to incentivize cargo bikes in certain areas of the downtown as a result of that data collection. That's something we will certainly be looking closely at moving forward.
Yeah, I think the report that I read about it a couple of months ago said that the online shopping adds another 1 million trips to the streets of New York. That's the one I read a while ago. Now, so do we track, never mind the freight delivery, what about the all this ordering of food and products that come by, the Uber and Lyft and all these other delivery systems? Is there any tracking of that? And does that add, any extra trips, and how many extra trips to the roads of Toronto?
Through the chair, we don't have access to that information. I don't believe Uber provides that information through the data that they regularly report to us. I think that it would be certainly interesting to look at how that works. Again, through the Smart Freight Center work, they're looking at the updated methods of delivery. And certainly we have good partners at the University of Toronto and the University of Waterloo who would be, I think, best suited to help us work through what are the best and most predictable ways to get that data, but also what are what did that replace? So did it replace individual people going back and forth from their home to get something? Can you do that more effectively with a service like a Uber Eats or Skip the Dishes that's going to be delivering multiple packages? I also know that some of the smaller items that you were describing to the deputant are not always delivered in large vehicles. Sometimes they're delivered in passenger vehicles as well. So we learned a little bit more about that at the Smart Freight Center in terms of measurable data. We don't have it, but we'll certainly be staying on top of those trends.
And wasn't there a report that these freight delivery companies, UPS and others, will park anywhere because the drivers never pay for the tickets, that the corporate head office tells them, park wherever you want, we'll pick up the ticket price?
Through the chair, I'm not familiar with such a report, but I'm sure each company has their own methods for dealing with double parking and tickets.
So we don't know whether that practice exists as reported, that they really basically get their tickets paid for corporately and not individually.
No, we might be able to find out some of that anecdotally, but certainly nothing.
Councillor Cole? Yeah, that was it. The clock froze actually for about 2 minutes, so you're pretty well approaching. Any other questions for staff? Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much. What's our goal of this congestion management plan? What is the goal?
Through the chair, this is actually just an annual report that we do every year. This is a report back on accomplishments for the congestion management plan. This is probably the fourth one that we've done. The actual updated plan is not what's before you, and we have been working on that, and we'll be bringing an updated plan to council in March of 2020.
So, but what is the goal of the congestion management plan? Is it to, like, what I'm looking for is, like, is it moving people? Is it a modal shift? Is it moving the number of cars around? Is it's like, it's not safety, it's not our Vision Zero plan. Is there a measure for which we can actually set success?
Well, there's multiple goals of a comprehensive plan like this one. In part, it's to manage congestion. In part, it is to ensure that there's mobility. There's environmental goals as well related to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. All of that has to be contemplated in terms of managing growth or in reflection of increased growth in population. And I think what you'll find in the updated congestion management plan that we're going to be bringing in March is it's going to be quite specific to recommendations that we believe will really move the needle on managing congestion.
Okay. Do we?
Oh, sorry. Through the chair, if I could add as well, too. Yes, so fundamentally, it is about trying to move more people through the corridor and a little bit less of an emphasis in terms of just cars alone. In terms of sort of key sort of performance metrics, looking to improve upon travel time, minimizing delay at intersections, again, for all road users, and at the same extent with an emphasis towards reliability. If it takes you a certain amount of time to commute along a particular road, it shouldn't on one particular day or multiple days take significantly more than what you would typically experience.
Okay, thank you. Do we know how many vehicle for hire vehicles are on our road at any given point in time? I'm just asking if we have an idea of.
I can.
Through the chair, I have a number here that's 90,000 Uber and Lyft drivers. Oh, Carlton knows. There he is. Sorry, he's got it.
Right, yeah, this is my area. I'm
sure.
acting for Tracy, but this is, again, falls under municipal licensing and standards. So while we license 90,000 Uber and Lyft drivers, our data shows, and through the congestion management work that we have done with transportation, it shows that it's more in line with 5,000 to 6,000 cars on the road for private transportation, and then taxis would be 5,000 as well. The important piece to note of the trip data, again, there's a lot of 175,000 trips per day. I want to reiterate that that's only 3% of car trips per day. So the deputant talked about freight movement being number 3, so this is one component. It's not the component. And the other thing is that the biggest piece, the biggest shift, the demand, is Friday and Saturday evenings, getting people out of the core.
So that 5,000 to 6,000 number, are those active trips that are going on, or vehicle for hire vehicles on the road?
They are vehicles on the. They are vehicles on the road. They do not meet actually the demand that is out there. The demand is here, and the number of vehicles is here.
So I just want to, I'm going to drill in a little bit here. It's, how is that number, like, how do we have that data?
So this is one of the requirements in the vehicle for hire bylaw, is to get that data from private transportation companies. We also ask for it from taxis and limousines. They're not as advanced, and as of January 1st, they're going to be required to give us this data as well. They are balking at that so far. It's a piece of work that we're going to have to work with them to get data so that it tells the story. There's a number of pieces that tell the story about congestion and trips in our city.
So we have data of how many vehicle for hire trips are happening, but also the ones that are roaming around at any given point in time. That people have switched their app to I'm working now, and like we've got both those data sets, because I think that's pretty critical in judging the congestion management of the congestion impacts.
What I can tell you is that when a private transportation company is roaming, they get a ride quicker than a traditional taxi.
Sure, but that's the data of the 5,000 to 6,000. It's those roaming cars. people that are in cars and people that are roaming cars waiting for pickups.
It's the number of cars that are correct.
And do we know where they are?
Yes, it is throughout the city. We have data that they provide us where all those drop-offs are. What's interesting to note is while there's a number of trips in the downtown core, there's also a number of trips at the transportation hubs. So at Yorkdale, at Kennedy Station, Islington Kipling Station, and the greatest growth of private transportation companies is actually in the suburbs.
Okay, thank you. That was your last question.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, I understand you have a motion?
On commercial deliveries and rideshare, especially with, anecdotally, I think rideshare has a big impact, and the deputy didn't raise the thing about commercial deliveries, which I think captured the imagination of the committee, and we need to get a report on that. The second piece is, there are not a lot of tools left in the toolbox, but we haven't really looked at one-way streets yet. I'm not saying that we adopt that by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that as a tool that's in the toolbox, I think it's useful to say what's left and what would be the impact of that. Taking into consideration that some councillors may not agree with the use of one-way streets, but let's see what that does. And the results of the implementation of the downtown operations study. So that was just a study that was done, about 5 or 6 years ago to see what we could do to move congestion through the core. And that hasn't actually come up. No one's really actually reported out on that. So I think that there were about 10 or 12 recommendations. That was something Steve Buckley, the former general manager, put in place. And do you have my other one? So, are you ready yet? Retry. And then, the general manager of transportation be requested to include the principle and first principle as a first principle. I wrote that out. The first principle of the congestion management plan is to reduce congestion. I didn't think that one was necessary, but it became clear to me when I think...
That's the most important one.
It is the most, but no, but the remarkable thing, Mr. Chair, is I think Councillor Layton raised, he hit the nail on the head when he asked the question, what's the goal of the congestion management plan? And it seemed to me, Mr. Chairman, that our staff seem to have trouble verbalizing what that answer really was. It should be crisp, it should be precise, that the first principle is to reduce congestion. Now, some people might want to modify that and say different, like pedestrian or transit or bikes or what have you.
Just say moving people around.
But it should be, the first principle should be to reduce congestion. And in my view, they didn't come up with a crisp answer, and if they don't have a crisp answer, we actually need to be very, very clear. I thought it was obvious, but apparently it's not. So therefore, I believe that the first principle of the congestion management plan, just so there is no ambiguity, is to reduce congestion. So I think that we need to adopt that. And those are my motions.
A lot of time getting ready for this. Well, you'll have your chance in the spring. I didn't ask a lot of questions of staff.
Also, I'll just conclude. I didn't ask a lot of questions of staff because I didn't want to get bogged down in a lot of the detail, because at council I was informed that there is a fairly substantial report coming back in the spring or in the first half of the year, and I didn't want to get into a lot of the detail because we should actually be doing a deep dive when it comes. And so this report actually, I think Councillor Layton raised that question. I think he and I may have both seen the same thing in the congestion management report. They talked about accomplishing things that they were asked to do rather than addressing the issue of congestion itself, right? And achieving a thing isn't really necessarily addressing congestion. We need to focus in on the outcome, which is reducing congestion. And that's, I think, what the public, no, I know what the public wants us to do, and we should be keeping our, it's not, achieving a process is not the same thing as achieving a goal, and we should be focusing in on achieving the goal.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Wong. Any other speakers on this item?
I have a question, sorry. A quick question on the first of the two motions.
Yeah.
Okay, if we can put the first motion on the screen.
And just thank you for moving this. I think it actually takes care of Councillor Cole and my motion because of the 1A. If I could make one perhaps constructive addition, that is to add at the end of all of it or at the end of A, and recommendations on how to better manage these impacts, simply because often
I'm fine with that.
They might be named, but the staff might not feel empowered to bring forward what their recommended solutions would be.
On the first A.
That's great. So the words there are, and recommendations on how to better manage those impacts.
This is on the commercial vehicles.
Yeah, after this, the word Toronto.
I'm fine with that.
1A. Thank you. And then the second one, I'll on the second motion, also maybe a recommended friendly amendment. We'll see.
We'll see.
And rather than deleting, I'm using my yes and personality today to be constructive. It's to add the words through moving people safely and efficiently around Toronto.
That's fine.
So that would be.
Who wouldn't want that?
I don't know. I thought you might not. So on to the second motion.
As opposed to unsafely and inefficiently? That's fine.
I think one of them needs to be a B, though.
So this would be through moving people safely and efficiently around Toronto.
That's fine.
Efficiently around Toronto.
I think the word efficient takes into some of the environmental aspects and allows us to bring in active transportation in an interesting way. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We have done several things together.
All right.
In our course of being on council.
Thank you for that glowing moment. Any other speakers on the item? Councillor Cole.
I think it's been a productive, introspective look at congestion here, at the beginning of it anyways. I'm just going to move a motion that really complements what Councilman Wong put up. You can just put up my motion. It's just really part of what Councillor Layton was working on too. And the infrastructure environment requests the General Manager of Transportation to include as part of the March 20 report on congestion management data and recommendation on the contribution of increases from urban freight delivery vehicles associated with growth of online shopping. And that's why I'd like to leave this there for staff to look at, because you know, I don't really have any empirical evidence of whether the online shopping and the delivery of goods and services and food really has a positive or negative effect on road congestion. But I think we should start to look at that, because it's quite obvious that it is happening. You can't go up any street without seeing a UPS truck nowadays. Or you know, Canada Post, I think they hit the mother load. Their trucks are everywhere now. Before it used to be the postman walking up and down the street. Now it's their trucks parked on the sidewalks all the time. So I think we need to try and measure the impact of this, because I think everybody assumes, well, I'm doing the right thing, I'm shopping online, I'm getting my McDonald's hamburgers online. Because if you go to McDonald's now, there's 10 people in front of you. All they are is Uber drivers. They're not people picking up McDonald's like the old days. They're all drivers. So, and the same with the restaurants. you go into restaurants now, I notice it's drivers all in the restaurant is filled with drivers and not with real customers. The customers are at home sitting back saying, I'm doing the right thing, I'm not taking my car out. And so they're ordering it online, and so there's a vehicle on the road. So I think it's important to try and just measure this. Perhaps it's a wash. Perhaps this is a good thing, but I don't think we really know. I know in New York, they're very concerned about this, the impact of online shopping and the congestion being caused by online shopping, especially the size of the vehicles. Said because of the economics of it, I guess they feel you can get a lot of small packages into these big trucks they drive around in. So the big trucks are delivering the little boxes all the time. So anyways, we could at least try and find out what the numbers are. Is it an impact on congestion or is it not? But certainly the whole issue of the safety of these trucks everywhere now. And the blocking of lanes of traffic, which is quite common as they park their trucks in many cases on sidewalks, on no parking areas, because their tickets are picked up by the corporate headquarters in some cases. So anyways, I'd like to get that information. And just I'd like to add to the record, too, that we noticed we talked about Big Daddy, one of Toronto's builders. There's another interesting article on Mel Lastman, who predicted that downtown Toronto will be automobile-free in 2011. He said it's just going to be so congested down there, you just take all the cars off the road. So there's Mel predicting the future back in 2011.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cole. One suggestion.
Exactly, but there's nobody on the Shepherd subway. You can't find any people. Bessarion has less people.
Well, that's
than,
because it's only half built. If you'd built the whole line, it would be full.
Yeah, but it's
Hey, come on.
because you shouldn't build I call it a Shepherd stubway.
No.
Basically goes
It
nowhere.
is the North York Relief Line. It is when you half
Bessarion
build a
gets
subway.
3,000
The
people a day.
North York Relief Line. Look at this.
No, when you half build a subway, nobody will take it. You have to build a complete line, or
At
it is
what
a-
cost? The Dufferin bus carries 3 times more people than
Look,
the Shepherd
take it
subway.
outside.
if it was done when it was originally
money into the
proposed, it
Dufferin
would have been a
bus, never
fraction
mind
of
the
what the
Shepherd
cost is
subway.
now.
Don't enable him.
James.
Yes. So, Councillor Cole, on your motion, instead of the contribution of increases, shouldn't we be looking at the impact of increases?
Sure, that's.
Okay,
I'll
so
take that as a
just a suggestion there. Okay, after that discussion, I'm exhausted, but any other speakers on the item? Councillor Perruzza.
Yes. I'm so very glad, I don't often agree with my good friend here, Councilman Wong, but I'm so glad that he put that last motion up there because, you know, I've been sitting here now for some time, somewhat confused about what congestion really means. I'll tell you what it means in my mind, right? I look out over a highway and you got a sea of cars, kind of like, and all these like red lights in the back of the cars. They're all like parked bumper to bumper, right? Like endless. Nobody moving. You know, you get out of the parking garage here at City Hall, you make a left on Avenue Road, and it's like bumper to bumper, nobody moving.
Too bad, so sad.
It really is too bad, so sad for lots of us.
Why don't you use
But-
your motorcycle?
But that's what congestion to me is. To me, congestion is like gumming it up everywhere. And everything that comes forward essentially from transportation, while we deal with these like flowery things, reports that talk about congestion master planning, but all of the measures that come forward are slowing it down, Uber Eats, let as many cars out there as you want, unregulate them, let everybody order their McDonald's hamburger and have 5 Uber Eats guys competing to deliver that Big Mac. You look at our road system and it's like everybody's being funneled onto major arterial roads because nobody wants cars in their neighborhoods. You know, it's all like, do not enter at this time, one way up, one way down, one way east, one way west, because everybody wants to live in the city and then feel like they're living out in Wawa. We want nobody in front of their car, in front of their home. We ad nauseum and endlessly receive these reports at community council and everywhere else about where we just gum up our streets with like humps and pinch points and all of these other measures, kind of like, you know, to sort of under the guise of other things. So the real job of transportation, it would seem to me, under all of those other things, are to gum it up. Make it as sticky as possible everywhere so that people can move around. And to my mind, that creates congestion. We don't see any reports here that says, you know what, we should be regulating the heck out of, you know, all of these, like, you know, people who work at the city and then go moonlight for a few hours and turn on their app. And by the way, I had an opportunity once to get on an Uber car. And my good friend, Councillor Coley, was going to pay for the ride because he had already put it on his thing. I forget where we were. We were away somewhere.
You were probably at McDonald's.
And there was plenty of space in the car, and we were going back to the same address. And I remember saying to Councillor Cole, I can't. I'd rather walk and find some other way to get back, but to get into that Uber car, because just philosophically, ideologically, it was something I couldn't do. And I still don't have any of those apps on my phone, and I would hope that I will continue and never capitulate to that. I'll go pick up my own pizza when I need to pick up my pizza. I'll try to walk or cycle there when I can. And most of the time I do make it at home, so I don't gum up the street. I don't add another vehicle to the street to do that. But Mr. Chair, I say this, and and really I say it seriously. On one hand, we talk about congestion and what we're doing about congestion, and that every single thing we do is not about making it move quicker, not about allowing people to flow more freely, not about moving people along or making the city work better. Everything we do is about gumming it up, sticking it up. And so we can talk a good line, but the reality is the reverse. That's what we're doing. And we are the principal culprits of congestion, as I see congestion out of my own brain.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Perusa. I can't believe I delayed my vacation to be at this meeting, but I am so glad I'm here. Any other speakers?
Yes, please.
We'll make it short, right?
I will. I'll try.
Thank you, Councillor Layton.
First of all, I'm starving right now with all the mention of food that's coming out of here. So I will try to make it brief. You know, I read this report, and I'd like to thank staff for this, because we have asked transportation staff to do the impossible, right? They're not in charge of the number of people that are on our roads. They're not in charge of the planning department who's putting new buildings up. They're not in charge of the TTC who would actually offer the real solution to congestion. We've kind of said, look, you got a set amount of space on the roads, and we're going to give you 3 enormous competing interests. And at that same time, we're going to throw at you several crises around safety on the streets, around shutdowns that happen on the TTC, like we saw just a couple of days ago. We have asked them to do the impossible. But if you look at what they've accomplished, it has entirely been, my first questions was, it's kind of the opposite viewpoint of my colleagues across the table, was about broadening the definition of when we talk about congestion. Because I actually feel like the dominant direction in at least what was being reported on, not all of their work, and is clearly not how staff have taken it, have been about addressing congestion from cars. not about gumming it up. You look at their completed projects from 2018 to 2019 in attachment 1. Traffic signal timing. That was to help move cars. They did along 13 corridors one year and 10 corridors the next, almost 500 signals. They have a live operation of a new advanced traffic management system. In my mind, you know what it is? It's someone looking at a bunch of screens and pushing buttons to try to make cars moving faster. They're not looking at the number of pedestrians on sidewalks. They might be, but in my mind, this is what they're doing. Smart work zone pilot deployment, development. Deployment. This was about us not taking up as much space on the road so that cars can move more uninterrupted. There's a whole list of things that they've been doing to try to address the movement of cars. And yes, I know part of this is factoring in our obligations around climate change, making sure we're reducing the amount of congestion, the contribution of vehicles to greenhouse gas, the emissions of greenhouse gases from vehicles. So I just think it's important to say thank you for staff for what they've done. We've asked for the impossible. There are several competing interests, but at the end of the day, the only thing that will address congestion and better manage congestion in our roads is getting people out of their cars. If it's by planning more complete communities, if it's to ensure that people can walk to go get their Big Mac or their pizza or the ingredients to make a pizza, thank you, Councillor Cole. All of these things are necessary to get people out of their cars within their communities. Building better public transit. And for the record, Dufferin moves more people. The Dufferin bus moves more people than both the SRT and the Shepherd subway. I have just checked. It's not 3 times. It's not 3 times, Councillor, but it is more. Is investing in public transit. Massive investments in both surface and underground where appropriate, and with the appropriate technology. We might disagree on that, but let's get some experts giving us that advice. And making it safer and more attractive for people to get out of their cars and walk, or get out of their cars and ride a bike. Because that is what they're doing in other jurisdictions. That is what's working to get people out of their cars and address congestion. The city of Copenhagen is almost the exact same climate as here. 30 years ago, they had a congestion problem. And then, as a matter of policy, on every street, almost every street, they built bike lanes when they reconstructed the roads. Every street. Now they're approaching 50% of trips in Copenhagen are taken by bicycle. That is how you get people out of their cars. You give them other options. And that's the only way we're going to address congestion, because we can't build roads. That's not the solution to this problem.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other speakers on the item? No? Okay, thank you. We have 3 motions, 2 from Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, and is it 1 from Councillor Cole?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, first motion's on the screen. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Second motion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third motion, Councillor Cole. Impact is there. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item is amended. We're good. Okay, thank you very much. Item 7, held by Councillor Cole, the Lavender Creek water quality assessment. Councillor Cole, questions for staff, or did you want to speak on the item?
Mr. Chairman, it's my ward, so can I?
Oh, yes, no,
Yeah,
questions for
okay.
staff are,
Yeah, all right, okay. Thank you.
he did hold the item, so,
I know, but I've been sitting here since 9:30.
no, we
Thank you.
understood. Questions for staff, Councillor
So
Nunziata?
just
Can
to,
I just say we appreciate Councillor Nunziata sitting here?
We do, we actually do.
I got here before you did.
Yes, you did.
All right,
Yeah.
ask your question.
Okay, to city, to staff, thank you very much for the report, and this is actually a very good news story. So if you can just give us, summarize the report on it. This was on a member's motion that, that I had passed through my office at council.
Sure, through the chair. Council, yes, we undertook in response to the member motion the testing of outfalls along the Lavender Creek. We working on particularly the open channel section, which runs from Weston Road westward north of St. Clair. And then there's a channel section that goes up to Black Creek, and there's the outfall there. So what we did was, under dry weather conditions, we took samples at the outfalls, and we're looking in particular for a number of things, but E. coli, which is the bacteria that we have in our intestines, which helps with digestion. We did find one positive outcome for the E. coli. We traced that back to a business on Symes Road where there was a cross connection. So instead of sanitary flow continuing into sanitary sewer, it was going into a storm sewer. So we were able to trace that back from the outfall, which is, of course, the storm water is channeled to on Lavender Creek. The company and the management firm were quite concerned and shocked at that, where there was a notice of violation was issued to them, and they rapidly repaired the cross connection, and we confirmed that it was indeed corrected. So that was a positive outcome in the sense of improving water quality in Lavender Creek.
Okay, well, I just want to thank you very much for your report, and thank you as well for attending last night's meeting. You'll be at tonight's meeting as well.
Yes, I will, as well as Joanne DeCaro and David True from our outfall monitoring group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Any other questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Cole, you held the item.
Yes, Lavender Creek, it is a tributary of Black Creek, and it flows in a part of the city that is abutted by all these former industrial users, used car or graveyards for cars, whatever they call those graveyards for cars, junkyards, and all kinds of chemical plants, and so all the runoffs went into the creek for years. Now, a number of years ago, the students and staff of Archbishop Romero High School undertook the cleanup and the monitoring of Lavender Creek as a school project, and they've been doing this for years. They also planted, I think, about 5,000 trees. They took garbage out of the creek. They restored some of the natural creek bed. So I think, given that this is a success story to what it was a number of years ago, I think we should send a congratulations and a letter of appreciation on behalf of this committee and on behalf of Councillor Nunziata, who obviously cares much about the Lavender Creek, that we send a letter on behalf of this committee and the councillor to the students and staff of Archbishop Romero High School, thanking them for their previous work in cleaning up Lavender Creek and making it more sustainable and making it more environmentally.
I'm going to, Councillor Cole, we'd be happy to draft a motion on your behalf thanking, now it was a high school group that helped.
The staff and students of Archbishop Romero High School.
Archbishop Romero High School? Okay.
No, so the students have been working on this for about 10 years. You know, they've done. So.
Yeah. No, Councillor Cole, we're going to draft a motion thanking the high school.
Yeah, and staff and students.
City staff and students for their dedication to this facility, for the cleanup of the facility, modernization of the facility. How would you like it worded?
Not modernization, the cleanup.
The cleanup, okay.
And the tree planting and environmental improvements made to Lavender Creek over the years.
Right, and we're conveying it on behalf of committee members
And Councilor Nunziata.
and Councilor Nunziata. Okay, we're just working on that. Does that conclude your remarks? Because I'm going to go to another speaker, but we will come back to that in a minute. Any other speakers on the item? No? Okay, I'd like to, why don't we hold the item down for the motion to be ready, so we'll be back to it in a couple minutes. In the interim, we can go to item 8. Now, I held it down because I wanted to move a motion, but is there anyone else? I have a few questions for staff. Is there anyone else who has questions for staff? You have a motion?
I have a couple, are we on the water?
Yeah, so number 8, ensuring quality of Toronto's drinking water. Update.
So I went through the testing, and maybe if staff could just take us through the testing on where lead is found and why it's found there.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The testing that we do, and there's two types of testing we do. A regulated testing that's required by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks.
No, I saw that. So let me backtrack for a sec. I know that because that's in the report here. I guess the question I'm asking is this: is lead generally found everywhere in the system, irrespective of whether or not you have lead pipes? And if that is, why is it so?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to answer that, the largest concentrations of lead are generally found in the older parts of the city, where lead service lines were used, and that's that connection between the water main and the meter into the house. And they used to use lead up to about 1950s in this city. They also did continue to use lead solder, and you might get fixtures that had made out of brass that had high lead content. So there are some instances where you might find some trace elements of lead in other parts of the city. And that is the reason why we had implemented a corrosion control program that essentially protects the entire system, because we treat at the treatment plant, so that protection is afforded every home, though the highest concentrations are found in older homes.
Okay. So in the suburbs, where the water mains, I'm assuming, are metal, correct? The main mains in the street are metal.
Correct.
Okay. And the mains are cement and mortar lined in most cases, right?
That's correct, but the lead is not coming from the water mains.
No.
Just so we're clear.
I understand that. And off those mains, let's say you have predominantly copper pipes that come off the mains into the homes. Why then do you find lead in when you do that testing? Although smaller amounts, but you still find lead there. How's the lead getting there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we typically don't find it. The test results that we have, this is where I was getting in the regulated versus the non-regulated. So the non-regulated samples, we try to do it for homes that have lead, but we won't reject a request to do a lead test for a homeowner that might have a copper service, just to give them peace of mind. In most cases, we don't detect lead in those situations.
Zero?
If you find it, typically it's zero or beyond the method detection limit of the equipment that we have is the language that the laboratory will use. What I was trying to explain to you is you will see it in certain buildings where even the lead service doesn't exist anymore, but you're still getting traces. Well, that building might have been an older building that might have been built with lead solder and these older fixtures that had higher lead content. So you still might see trace elements of lead when you test, but the concentrations are nowhere near as great as when it's going through a lead service line.
So lead never comes. So as water comes through the main and into properties, what you're saying is that even though it's traversing lead pipes, it's the particulates or the particles aren't coming back into the system, aren't floating through the rest of the system.
That's correct. It's not flowing back into the distribution system because the pressure is going into the home and it's used in that home, so that you're always getting that flow in that direction.
Thank you. Any further questions of staff?
Yes, Councillor Nunziata.
Yeah, just one question. When the city is, particularly in the suburbs where we have the old pipes, when the city is doing work on a street, at one time, I don't know if you still do that, is that you offer the homeowners at that time, if they want to replace their pipes, on their private property as well as when the city is doing the work on the city portion. Do we still do that?
Mr. Chair, yes, we do that. We do notify homeowners that if we are replacing the city water main and upgrading any of the substandard services along that stretch of roadway, they get advance notice in multiple cases. So they will be told many months in advance that we're coming. We'll remind them again. And so there'll be 2 or 3 notices provided to a homeowner to take advantage of that opportunity that they should coordinate doing a change out of the portion of the service that's on private property.
Right.
And because really the best thing to do, if you're worried about lead in your home, the best thing to do is get rid of that lead service line, the entire portion, the city portion as well as the public portion. And we constantly are encouraging people to do that.
Okay, and when we do that, do we get a lot of residents that are, that are interested in doing that as far as the program? Like, do we get a lot of interest?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have done survey testing to see what kind of uptake there is on people coordinating that program. With respect to the construction side of it, in the past, we've only seen about a 25 to 30% uptake, where those homeowners that do have substandard services, they actually do coordinate at the same time.
I guess we should maybe communicate that because,
And we do. We have.
It's a lot cheaper. It's a lot more cost-effective for the homeowner if they do opt into the program when the city is doing their work. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Any other questions for staff?
Yes.
Councillor Layton.
I don't know if I have to, but just is lead in our water, at least when for people who have lead pipes on the private side, is that a significant health concern?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to have our colleagues from Toronto Public Health speak about the concerns.
Hi, through the chair. It can be a source of exposure for people in the city if they are consuming drinking water that contains lead. However, over time, we do know that the levels of lead in drinking water in Toronto have gone down significantly over the last several years, especially with the addition of corrosion control. However, we always recommend that people, if they suspect they have lead service lines, to make that confirmation through a plumber to reduce their risk of any exposure to lead in the family, especially when there are high-risk individuals in the home, such as pregnant women, infants, young children.
Okay, thank you. You stole my second question. So, perfect. Just one other question. This is to you, Lou. On Appendix E, the list of companies with compliance problems in 2018, 2 of them have something that says terminated for non-compliance with agreement. I understand what that means, but what in actuality would those 2 companies do now with their waste?
I had a request from Site.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that you're going back to the previous item, item 7?
Sorry, I thought this was the...
No, we're on item 8.
No, this is item 8.
Well, give me a moment.
Thought it was.
The committee chair wants to...
I'm sorry.
Give me a moment to go back.
This is in item 7. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Sorry, I was stuck in an
Threw me off there. I was trying to...
I was deep in an appendix.
Okay.
I was looking for that appendix.
My apologies. It was just like 2 pages away from the front of the room.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other questions for staff? I have a couple, and then we can go to speakers. What would be the average cost of replacing, for the average household, replacing the lead pipes?
Mr. Chair, the average cost would be probably now about $3,000 to $5,000 per household to replace, and that can vary significantly depending on how far back the house is from the property line, as well as whether you can actually just what they call use a torpedo, so essentially do a micro tunnel in without disturbing your driveway or any steps or landscaping. If you have to do an open cut in order to replace that, then the cost for restorations can be more.
Now, a number of years back, maybe 20 years back, or maybe it's still on a sale agreement for a single-family detached home or a semi-detached, they had to swear an affidavit that no urea formaldehyde was in the home. Are there any provisions in those sale agreements that warrant or guarantee that there's no lead pipes, or that's not really part of the...
No, Mr. Chair, that would be a requirement that the Toronto Real Estate Association would have to discuss to put in their standard form agreements.
But we know...
My understanding, no, there is no requirement.
We know no such agreements. And by your estimation, how many households in Toronto still have lead pipes?
Mr. Chair, all I can give you is our best guess, because we do not have the data of the private side. We've never tracked that ever. Our best guess is it's probably around 30,000 to 35,000 households that could have still lead on the private side. It's a little less on the city side, where we are replacing them, as I mentioned earlier, while we're doing upgrades to our water mains, as well as we do have an on-demand program where if a homeowner is very concerned about it and is prepared to replace their private side portion of the lead, they can apply to the city, and the city will pay for and upgrade the city portion. And so we do encourage homeowners who do have lead to take advantage of that program, and that will take the entire lead service line out, and we do track those numbers. So we're probably down around 25,000 on the city side.
So by your estimate of the 35,000, how many would know they have the lead pipes and either can't afford to do it, or just haven't gotten around to doing it, or are not interested in doing it?
With respect to knowledge of whether they have lead service pipes, I didn't have any specific data on that, but I did test whether they knew where the shutoff valve was when we were doing the water meter program. And I was very surprised to find out that it's a very low percentage of people that actually know the infrastructure of their house. So I would say there would be a low percentage of people know they have lead, and that's why we encourage them to talk to plumbers to figure out what they have. With respect to homeowners and their willingness to pay, we did survey that, and really what we found is they viewed that as a home improvement, and in their mind they were doing the return on investment, where they thought that investing in their kitchens and their bathrooms gave them a better return than investing money to do lead service replacement. And that's what the research showed us. So they're more worried about that than they were worried about the lead.
Okay. All righty, thank you very much. Speakers? Deputy Mayor Min Wong?
Chair has a motion, but I have a motion as well that can be added to that. The Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer be requested to report back on the monthly amount a homeowner would pay if they applied the cost of changing their lead pipes by adding the cost to their mortgage, applying current rates of a 5-year, 25-year mortgage. So this is for those who actually who want the city to somehow supplement or pay or assist residents to pay for their pipes. the point I'm trying to make here, for those who haven't considered this or done the math, with the real estate market, especially with the majority of them, we heard from staff, are in downtown Toronto. Folks in downtown Toronto, their homes are, the equity they've built up has been massive over the last number of years. So their homes are worth millions of dollars. They have the capacity, with interest rates being at all-time lows, to actually go and get low interest, add the cost to their mortgage, and they could pay for it themselves quite easily without any hardship. What this motion does is it measures the hardship. It says if you wanted to replace your pipes, how much it would cost if you added it to your mortgage for a monthly payment. This is meant to inform what I think is, if I'm predicting a future discussion, that some members of council want the city to involve itself in providing low-interest loans. Not only would that be expensive in terms of the administration, but it would be an unnecessary expense because residents can already afford it right now. And this is providing that information in advance of a future debate that we're going to have.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. Any other speakers? I have a motion that I'd like to move as well, but any other speakers on the item?
I'll speak, and I'd like to thank the chair for bringing forward this motion. I think it's an important initiative. We, as some will know, we debated this some time ago. I think it was about 4 years ago when we started getting more comfortable with using the local improvement charge mechanism as a way of financing important environmental initiatives on private property with a full cost recovery model. I was very proud when that first went through with the Home Energy Loan Program, and this is an equally as important application of it, as it would allow some to access financing that they might not otherwise be able to access. Now, Councillor Minnan-Wong raises an interesting point that this would allow, or many people probably have enough equity in their home, but there are other costs associated with taking out, with building more into your mortgage. There are legal costs associated with it that many people might not want to take, because as a percentage, the cost is rather low. I've replaced lead pipes on 2 homes because our street had their lead pipes removed. So when I moved into a house when my partner was pregnant, we said, we better check this out. Found out they were lead pipes. We had them changed. There's, I think, a much better way of doing it in that when we extend the contract. So the way it actually works is the city says, we'll come and do it, but you have to get a guarantee that your side's going to get done. Well, the first, in my sort of first home that we did it in, there was the amount that the city contractor was going to charge to do both the private section and the public, along with the public section at the same time, was 3 times the amount that when I got other quotes, 3 times the amount that those other quotes were. 3 times. So of course, I took the less expensive option. I thought I was being budget wise. As it turns out, it is actually just a whole lot more work administering that from the public's end. The second time around, I didn't even get another quote. I asked the city side to do it. They quoted me a reasonable price, and I'm not sure why there was a difference before this one and after, and got the whole pipe done. So I think the lesson is there's a better way, I believe, of doing our contract that will get better value for homeowners if we start to at least factor in that there needs to be a standard price or a standard way of calculating the price for our vendor, because it would that we have doing the public side, because it is a lot less work if you actually go straight through and do the private and public side at the same time. But some families just might not be able to access that capital to do their side, so I don't think it's, if it's a cost recovery model for us, I don't think it's too much to for the city to come in and help support what can be a serious health concern in particular for women when they're pregnant and for small children.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other speakers on the item? Councillor Perruzza?
I just want to agree with Councillor Layton, and I'll tell you why. I mean, the way I see this, this is a bit of a shared responsibility. No, and there might be someone out there who made the conscious choice to put lead pipes in their, as a connection to the city water main when they built their place. But I would venture to say, without statistically knowing it, that most people didn't make that conscious choice. The city is an approving authority. The city is always been someone, an entity that has provided water service to people, and the city has a regulatory system by which it determines what materials are going to be used for the delivery of certain things. That's what we do. We approve that stuff. You got to get a plumbing permit to do plumbing work, and I imagine that that's pretty much always been the case, in a sense. So if we allowed lead pipes to go in, we did that as an approving authority, and we allowed them to go in, and now they pose a significant health risk to people that have lead pipes, that have lead pipes, and those lead pipes deliver them their water. So I believe that we have a responsibility there to help out in whatever way we can. I understand what Councilman Wong is trying to do, and he's saying, look, you guys got, because of the way the city's growing out, you're kind of like property rich now, and because you're property rich, then this is something you have to deal with on your own. And I think that's fundamentally wrong for us to shirk our responsibility as both an approving authority and someone who shares that responsibility at least from the property line to the main, because that's our pipe. That's not anyone else's pipe. So. Thank you for that.
Just briefly.
Thank you, Councillor Peruzza. Councillor Cole?
Yeah, just briefly, I think it's an opportunity also to remind people doing renovations that, there are certain, as the general manager was saying, in terms of the priorities. I hear cases of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a bathroom, hundreds of thousands of dollars on kitchens, yet when they're told that maybe you should spend some money on making sure you don't have that lead pipe connection on the private side, they say, well, let's not do that. So I think somehow we've got to get a reminder out to the public that, yeah, it's great that you're doing your new bathrooms, your new kitchens, but in terms of providing safe drinking water to your family, you should spend perhaps a little bit of money towards removing the lead pipes that are on your private portion. And I think it's just a reminder somehow we've got to get out there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other speakers before I move my motion? I think the people across the city, generally speaking, don't want bigger government. They don't want smaller government. They want better government. And the one thing that, perhaps not the one thing, but perhaps the most important thing governments do is protect people. They protect their personal safety. They help protect their health. And I think even though the numbers seem small of 30 to 35 households, I think we have some responsibility to make sure we can facilitate the conversion of these households from lead pipes to copper or whatever technology is available at the time. So while I'm not a fan of loans because they're very heavy to administer, we'd like to revisit the issue from a few years ago. We have looked at this before. What options we can do to make sure these houses accelerate the conversion from lead pipes to pipe a piping system that is healthy for their household. The amount that we're talking about, as discussed, was in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. Financial institutions, banks have been suggested, but the bottom line is if you go to a bank for this amount of money, it's not worth the processing fees, it's not worth the bank's time. They really won't want to give you a small loan of this nature. What they'll try and do is look at the equity of your home and give you a $50,000 line of credit at a high interest rate, and you've actually taken on a lot more debt than you really need. These are micro loans. Whether we can assist through the Home Renovate program, or whether we may need the Toronto Real Estate Board to have a more robust system of making sure that properties change hands. There's a declaration that there's no lead pipes in the household, and that would certainly be an opportunity to have those remediated before the closure of that transaction. So I advance circulated the motion. It's on the screen. Member committee has asked that it be broken into two parts, so we're prepared to have it as two votes ad seriatim. And we can vote on this, and we have your motion as well. Okay, so Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong's motion is on the screen. All those in favor? 2, 3. Opposed? That carries. And the other motion to have... we could vote. Do you want to record a vote on my motion? No? You're okay? So my motion is on the screen. We'll break it up into two parts, as was requested by committee member. Number one part, all those in favor? Carries unanimously. And the second part, some work for the Chief Financial Officer. Recorded vote on item 2.
All those in favor of the highlighted motion on the screen? Councillor Cole, Councillor Layton, Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Perruzza. Any opposed? Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, that motion carries.
That motion carries. And the item is done. Oh, so we go back to, sorry, item 7. Councillor Cole, did you want to just quickly move your motion?
Yes. The General Manager of Toronto Water, we requested to thank the staff and students of Oscar Mineral Catholic Secondary School on behalf of the Director of the Environment Committee and Councilman Ziada for their contributions and efforts in helping Lavender Creek and improve its environmental sustainability.
All right, thank you very much. We asked the clerk to convey this to the, I guess, the principal of the school. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That carries. And I think we're in number 10, and there is a deputation. Is Johnny Dibb here? This is the Chute closure program. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
All right. I just wanted to say that, so this item is proposing expanding the Chute closure program to buildings that can find arrangements in the private sector, as opposed to only buildings that can find an arrangement with the City of Toronto's solid waste management. At least that's how I understood it. And I just want to make 2 points. While the maturity in the private sector of collecting recyclable waste is pretty good, when it comes to compostables, collecting compostable solid waste, the private sector is really horrible at it. In fact, companies go under all the time that try to take on that business. The only successful composting program that exists in the City of Toronto is the City of Toronto's Green Bin program. So that is one thing to note. And given that household waste is made up predominantly of compostable solid waste, this is something to keep in mind. We don't want buildings signing up to private sector diversion programs that will go under in a year or a year and a half, and then the building ends up sending garbage to the landfill again. The other really, really important point in this discussion is that when a building diverts more garbage, it saves money. And it's crucially important that the money savings goes into rent savings for the tenants. Today, tenants see their landlords doing upgrades that save them money. For example, when they reduce water intake, so when they reduce their water bill through improving appliances or whatever systems they improve, the landlord pockets the savings, doesn't give anything to the tenants. In fact, it's even worse. They go to the landlord and tenant board and they apply for an above guideline increase for the capital cost of implementing those cost savings. This is true of water, this is true of energy, whether it's for heating or for electricity for the elevators. All of these savings that landlords are pocketing are not being translated into reduced rent. It's important for the city, in my opinion, to not only push for diversion, for garbage diversion in buildings, but also to use that as a tool to reduce rent in a real way for tenants. We know from condominium buildings that the savings are significant. There's a couple poster child condominium buildings that have done this. One of them in Scarborough, they've reduced their landfill deliveries from 52 a year to 11, and that translated into real cost cutting on their maintenance fees in the condos. So those are just my 2 points. Tenants have to reap the benefit of any savings made, and we have to keep in mind that the private sector is, for many reasons, not because the private sector wants to be horrible at it, but the private sector is right now really horrible at dealing with compostable solid waste. The only successful program that exists is the city's green bin program. That's my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you very much.
To speak, Mr. Chairman?
Any questions for staff?
I'd like to speak.
Okay, no questions for staff. Speakers, Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, thank you. My motion is just to ask the staff to report back in the first quarter 2020. And the reason for that is that we do have some buildings that do have private collection, and we're trying to encourage them to switch back to the City of Toronto. And this was an existing program that we had in 2010. So I'm just asking for the staff to report back on it, because unfortunately there are some buildings that are unable to get city collection. So that's all I'm asking the committee to do, is report back in 2020. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Any other speakers on the item? Okay, we can put the just the motion from a letter to the committee. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So this is pedestrian safety at the intersection of Rogers Road and Old Weston Road, walked on by Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong on behalf of Councillors Nunziata and Bailo.
Just a minute, I just want to introduce it. On behalf of Councillor Bailo and myself, the wards are just back-to-back in this area, Rogers and Old Weston Road. What are you looking at, the picture? Oh, Councillor Pruitt says, loves the picture. Okay. So the reason I'm asking for this report, as you know, a week ago, a 9-year-old was struck at an intersection at Rogers and Old Western Road, which is part in my ward and Councillor Bailo's ward. So we brought this forward to ask the General Manager of Transportation Services to review the design of the intersection. Because that intersection, I don't know if people know that intersection, it's a very confusing intersection where you have two or three, you have two or three roads connecting into the major and onto Rogers Road, so you'll have traffic going everywhere. It's very confusing, even if you're there, to know if you should proceed or turn or not turn. So that's the reason we're asking for this, and so I hope committee will support the recommendation. Thank you.
So, Councillor Nunziata, there's no timeline for reporting back, which always concerns us. First quarter of 2020, January 2020?
Is the staff okay, will you be able to report back in the first quarter?
Fast.
Yeah, or sooner?
Through the chair, so the request is to it's to actually report back on alterations. I think we'll need a little bit more time than just first quarter.
Let's, first quarter?
July? No, I think we'll need a little more time than first quarter. I'd say before the council
I
break.
think we're just going to give first quarter.
Well, if you could try to get in the first quarter, because it is a very dangerous intersection.
Yeah, there's a certain urgency to it.
There is an urgency to it, and if you know the intersection, I know, Councillor Cole, you do, when you go to McDonald's? No? Okay.
Oh my gosh, okay. So I'm
All I can ask the staff, if the staff can, I mean, like, I can't, I can't control that.
They can always come back and ask for more time,
Yeah.
but let's leave it for the first quarter. We're just going to make the minor amendment to the motion and then vote on it. As an FYI, I received a very last-minute walk-on motion from Councillor Cole regarding cycling on... No, we're just waiting a second. So, no, we haven't moved on yet. I'm just giving you an FYI. I received a walk-on motion during the meeting from Councillor Cole regarding cycling on Eglinton. I'd be prepared to add it to the agenda if it's the will of committee. No, we had to hold it down because the motion wasn't ready. We got it now? Okay, so the motion's ready now. Okay, all those in favor? Pass unanimously. Now, back to what I was, the item is amended. All those in favor? Councillor Cole, very quickly.
Yeah, there's an urgency here because the work is rapidly, concluding on the building of the Eglinton LRT there, the Eglinton subway. So we have to coordinate the Eglinton Connects, the proposed cycling lanes and the completion of the sidewalks, everything. So we've got to start to get that coordinated immediately before, the work goes ahead without this consideration. So I'm trying to just mesh the two in a timely fashion.
Okay, so we need to add it to the agenda. All those in favor, adding it to the agenda? And I guess we can put it on the screen because I assume nobody has a copy other than me. So let's put it on the screen and we'll vote on it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Want to take a second? All right. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I think we're done. So I just wanted to thank committee members and councillors, city staff and clerks, of course, and members of the public for joining us today. I wanted to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy Hanukkah and a safe and happy holiday season, and we look forward to reconvening in the new year. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good job, Mr. Chair. Good job.
You made it through.